we're going to replace some wheel bearings and races. This is a rotor and hub off of a 1984 Mercedes 230e W123 chassis. All the W123 chassis should have this same setup for a rotor and a hub assembly. First thing we need to do, once the rotor and hub assembly is off of the car, if you don't know how to do that, it's in one of my other videos where I take it off of the car. It's really easy. You just have to take the wheel off and the caliper. It's not a big deal. But once it's off the car and we have it in the workshop on the bench, first thing we have to do is separate the rotor from the hub. So we need to take off these bolts here, which come around to the back of the rotor, are in here. These are a 10 millimeter Allen key, 10 millimeter Allen key, and they're in here really tight. So the first thing we're going to do, heat it up with a torch. Alright, we got those heated up nice, so they should be a little easier to take out now. We're going to use our 10 millimeter Allen key and our impact gun to take these out. You don't need an impact gun to do this, but it helps out a lot. You can just remount it on the tire and break them loose that way, but we're going to use an impact gun because it's way easier and way more fun. Here's another example of what not to do. Use your impact gun on your non-impact sockets, because this is what will happen. They'll break. So that's what I get for using my impact gun on a non-impact socket, but that's what I had, and fortunately I have another one. So we're going to heat it back up because it was taking a little too much pounding with the impact gun to get those off, so we're going to heat it up some more and then we're going to use the impact gun. After a little more heat and a new socket, hopefully these are easy to take off now. Yep, much easier with a little bit of heat. Now to separate the hub from the rotor, sometimes these come off easy, sometimes they don't. This one's going to be in the category of sometimes they don't. That's the power of propane right there. And we're off. And here's our hub. We are gonna have to first remove this seal. Seal puller is what I prefer to use. You can use a screwdriver or something else. Sometimes it helps to put it in a vise. It doesn't help if your vise isn't fastened to your workbench very well, though. Sometimes they really don't want to come out, and you got to stick a pry bar in there. There we go. Alright, so we got this seal out. Don't plan on reusing that. And inside there is our inner bearing. Man, look at the grease on that. That is some nasty old grease. And there's lots of grease in here, so we're going to clean that up. Now that we're nice and clean, we're going to use a hammer and a punch to get these old races out, because we're going to replace the bearings, and anytime you do that you want to replace the races. So we're going to end up getting this chisel, sticking it through here and getting it right on the lip of this race, and kind of going in a circular motion as we hit it with the hammer. There we go. This outer race sits flush here with the outside of the hub, so obviously when we're chiseling it out, gotta set it up like this on some wood. And this is the one you really got to be careful with. This smaller race is a little bit more difficult to get out with the punch, so I'm going to use a chisel to get it started. Be really careful if you're going to do this. You don't want to mess up this hub. There we go. Time to put the new parts in. The little one is really easy to put in. You've just got to line it up, set this block of wood on top, hit it with a hammer until it sits flush. Really easy. The bigger one, you're going to set in like so, and we're going to use the old race. We're going to use the old race and set it on top like that, and then we're going to put our block of wood on top and hit it with a hammer. Looks good. This next step here is completely unnecessary, but it's something I like to do. We are going to take a unitized wheel mounted on our die grinder here, and we are going to clean up this surface here where the hub mounts to the rotor, and then we're going to clean up the corresponding surface on the rotor just to get rid of some of this gunk and corrosion and whatnot. So completely unnecessary, but I like to do it. Another part of the optional cleaning up step here is I like to put a little bit of anti-seize around here where we cleaned up, where the rotor and the hub come together, just to prevent corrosion in the future. Now we're going to line up the hub and put it back on. Now we're going to reinstall all of these socket head cap screws with a little bit of blue thread locker. Alright, those are all hand tight, so now we're going to use our impact gun and buzz all these down real quick. After that, I want to make sure our races and inside of this hub are really clean, because we're about to reinstall our bearings. If you don't have one of these bearing packers, it's really nice. Makes it really easy to pack bearings, or you can just do it the old school way with your hand, but these bearing packers are really nice. This is probably too much grease, but whatever. Careful not to get any grease on the rotor. I'm going to put in this inner bearing goes in. And we got our new wheel seal, so we're going to put that in. Got a block of wood. Perfect. I rust-proofed and painted this thing gold because why not? Before we put the hub and rotor back on, give this thing one last wipe down. Grab our hub and rotor assembly. Sometimes it takes a little bit of coercion to get this thing to sit on the spindle correctly. Sometimes you gotta tap it with a hammer really gently. Just be careful because you don't want to damage the seal on the back here, but that's about what you should have. That's how it should look. That's about how it should sit on this knuckle. We got our fresh outer bearing that we already packed. Slides right in. Now we're going to put our outer retaining nut on. Make sure you clean this thing up too. Now we got to make sure that this spins freely so that we don't have this too tight. Right now it's too tight. If this is too tight on here, you can burn out your bearings. Adjusting this end play nut is a little tricky. If it's too loose, you're gonna have noise like that, and if it's too tight, this rotor isn't gonna spin very well. So you want it to be just about nice and tight, but also you should be able to get a little bit of movement. You should be able to get this thing to spin, and it shouldn't make any noise. You're supposed to use a dial indicator for this, and there's a special procedure for doing it, but you can do it just kind of by trial and error, by feel. I've done it before and not had any issues. That's right about where you want to be. Any looser and we're going to start to get too much movement. So you can do it by hand and then tighten this down. Careful not to over torque that. Now we're just going to take our dust cover and we're going to put this on here, put a little bit of grease in it, and then you got to wipe this off. You don't want any grease hanging out on here. Lots of people are going to say you shouldn't do some of this stuff that I did. You shouldn't hit the races out with a steel punch like I did. You should use a brass punch or something like that. People are going to say you should use the dial gauge when you're adjusting the end play nut in here. And you know what? That's fine. If people want to do it that way, that's another way to do it. But this is how I do it. I've done it this way plenty of times. Never had a problem. If you do this by hand though, adjusting this end play nut, you'll want to drive the car around for a couple blocks afterwards and make sure you're not getting any wheel wobble because of this rotor moving around, because that nut's not tight enough. And you also want to make sure that you feel this and make sure it's not getting excessively hot. Because if it's getting excessively hot, then it's too tight and you're burning your bearings out. And if you're getting some wobble and some movement around, it's too loose and this whole assembly is moving around on the spindle. So that's how I do it. Hopefully this W123 will be back on the road soon. I've still got some more front end work to do, but hopefully we can get that done here really soon and we'll get this thing driving again.